Hello and welcome, everyone. It's lovely to see so many smiling virtual faces for another week's webinar. How is everyone doing? Good, lovely. I'm joined today by my colleague Rory, who's going to be helping me talk a little bit about the Cambridge SAQ, or the APS as it's called nowadays. It's just an extra little bit of personal statement that Cambridge offer you the opportunity to provide as part of your application. For those of you who haven't come to one of these before, my name is Matt. I look after the research team here at UniAdmissions. So my job is to make sure that all of the ideas, all of the data, all of the things that we suggest in this webinar and throughout our work is grounded in data, that it makes sense, that we can back it up with lovely graphs. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Rory. Rory, are you there?
Yes, hello. I think I'm just getting my video sorted. I don't know if you can see me.
Yes, and what a lovely sight.
well, marvellous, and yourself as well. It's I'm very glad to be here.
Fab. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about the what was formerly known as the SAQ, what's now the APS today. And next week, we're going to be talking about, UCAS will be over for the year. I believe the deadline is, what, 4 hours away? I'm sure you'll be feeling much better for it once it's gone. And we'll be talking through what sort of the next steps are, beginning to prepare for an interview, finalising your admissions test preparation, all those sorts of things next week. Going to be some interesting stuff, hopefully. What we're going to do today is I'm going to run through a few ideas about the SAQ. Rory's hopefully going to help me, and we're going to talk a little bit as well about the support we provide as an organisation, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. I think this is going to be a relatively snappy presentation today, so I think everyone should have escaped well in time for whatever the football match at 3 o'clock is. That's something to look forward to. Fab. We have spoken in the past. Wrong slide. So we'll first talk a little bit about what the SAQ is, talk about how to write a good one, and run through a couple of examples, as I know everyone loves an example. So is this something that you've had a lot of queries about from students and parents of late, Rory?
I think I had my first one yesterday. Actually, it's not come up too much, but it's definitely something which no one really knows. How it's different from a personal statement, or how important it is compared to the other stuff. So definitely something. I mean, I'll be learning lots today as well.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a surprise. It's one of the things, like the admissions test, that you don't want to find yourself in the position that you're putting in that application without knowing it's going to be there. Not necessarily because it's going to have an enormous impact on your application, but because it's always unpleasant to have that kind of surprise, and it makes it harder to put together a good application if you don't know what's coming down the road, so to speak. So the first thing to understand is the additional personal statement. As I said, it used to be called the supplementary application questionnaire. It is an extra form that is requested by Cambridge. In addition to the additional personal statement bit, there are also different questions about demography that they ask. So things about your personal life circumstances. And I believe this is where the section that Cambridge are asking about your experience during the pandemic is going this year as well, which is important to make sure that you have filled out, because of course everyone is going to have had some sort of fun with the pandemic, and so it's worth making sure that you've got the relevant information filled out there. The other thing to be aware of is that the SAQ, no one apart from the people dealing with your application at Cambridge are going to see it. Now, the great advantage of that is that you can put in a lot of things that we would, generally speaking, not generally suggest that you put in your main personal statement. So the way I like to think of this is sort of by an analogy. So if Rory, if you were feeling lonely this evening and you decided you wanted to go on a date, if you were to send a text message to five people who you fancied, but would you leave the name of the one you fancied the most in the text message that you sent to the other four?
I don't think that would go down too well. I mean, particularly not with my girlfriend, but generally that wouldn't go down well at all. Just in case she's listening somehow. No, so I think that would be good to leave that crucial bit of information out. Yeah.
Exactly. And similarly, we generally say if you're applying to Cambridge, that's marvelous. It's a good idea not to mention that in your personal statement explicitly, because it's the kind of thing that might upset LSE or Durham or Edinburgh or wherever it is else you're applying, on the basis that it's essentially it's a little bit rude to tell someone that you're clearly their second choice in that way. But with the SAQ, this is a great opportunity to do that. So if you have a paragraph of your personal statement that you've taken out because it's too much about Cambridge, this is a great place to put it back in. Because, again, this is going to be the bit that only Cambridge are going to see. Now, why does it exist? I'm sort of going to backtrack for a brief moment. It's particularly important for students who are applying for a range of different subjects. So if you're applying for, let's say, human, social and political sciences at Cambridge, but you're applying for PPE at UCL, you're applying for politics at LSE, you're not going to have been able to go into as much detail about the subject you're going for in the personal statement as you would like, because you don't want to, again, give away which one is your first choice. So you're going to have been a little bit more general, perhaps, than you might otherwise have been. So what you want to do is make sure that you are really focusing in on the sorry, you're applying to at Cambridge, that you're really looking at the detail of that course and what appeals to you about it. I would say the way to do this, go onto the university website, get hold of the syllabus for that first year of the course, go through it, figure out which of those ideas that you're working with in the first year you're most interested in, figure out which of the texts that they're studying you're most interested in, have a level of, we're not talking about, university level detail or even A-level detail, but really pull out the specific thing that interests you about the course at Cambridge. This again is an area where you can make a big difference in terms of the impression of effort and preparation you're giving across. It's the easiest thing in the world, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, to put in something kind of generic and say, oh, I want to go to Cambridge because it's famous and good. Now everyone knows that. That's not new information you're providing about yourself, and it's not new information about the university you're providing the reader. What you want to be doing is providing new information about you, about what you're excited about, why they might want to meet you and to interview you and work with you, but also to show that you are putting in the effort and that you're finding things out. A big part of the university application process is showing that you can do university style work, and part of that is being self-directed. So, at school, you don't have to figure out what the A-level texts are, you get told. The level of self-directed research you have to do, you can normally get an A by just showing up, and you don't have to do any wider reading. You just need to do a good job in class and write a good essay. At university, to score well, you're going to have to be going and finding ideas for yourself in the library. If you can't be bothered to read through the syllabus of the course and tell them why you want to do it, it doesn't suggest a kind of university level of engagement on your part. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we were looking at personal statements. But if you're dealing with ideas really quickly, not giving them enough time, not taking things seriously, all of these things make it harder for the admissions tutor to be interested in you, because it doesn't look like you're working in the right kind of academic way. So what you want to be doing in the SAQ is really demonstrating above and beyond what you've done in your personal statement, why it is that you want to go to Cambridge, why it is you want to do this particular course, and in making that argument, show that you've done the research, basically. And like I said, that research, I'm not suggesting you spend a week on it, but I'm suggesting that you have a really good reason you want to do the course based on the information about the course you can get hold of. So as I've said, let's take a look at what makes for a really good additional personal statement. So the first thing is, remember, only Cambridge is going to read it, so don't worry about being nice to the other universities. You don't need to worry about what LSE will think. You can be 100% about Cambridge. Now, we're going to come on to this in a moment. That doesn't mean you should say how great Cambridge is, how cool it is. You want to be focusing on why you want to do the course, not why you want to go there for the kind of prestige reasons. That's not supposed to be the point at any rate. You know, don't be afraid to be detailed, as I just said. Dig into why it is you want to do this particular course. You know, if you want to spend your whole 1,200 characters on 2 weeks worth of one module saying, I'm really interested in these two things, that's great. I think that's a great approach to it. You don't need to be, you've already done the general stuff in the main personal statement. This is about kind of putting a microscope on yourself and doing the detailed part. The other thing to remember is it is optional. Now, like all optional things, you should probably do it. You don't have to, but it's probably a good idea. But you know, if you don't have something to fill the 1,200 characters limit, which is, I'm just trying to think, that's just over a quarter of the length of the main personal statements. You've got room for a long paragraph, maybe a mid paragraph and a little introduction. If you don't have enough to fill it, that's fine. You don't want to fall into the trap that people do with personal statements of having a paragraph at the end where they try and shove 15 things in. You don't want to fall into the trap of kind of rambling. You want to try and keep it concise. If you've run out of things to say, then that's not a problem necessarily. It's absolutely fine to keep things concise. If you really only have 100 or so words, then if you've used them well, then that's more than good enough. Now, I alluded to this a moment ago, but the additional personal statement is particularly important for mixed subjects. So if you're applying for natural sciences, we mentioned human and social political sciences, land economy, these are subjects that you're not going to be applying for at other universities. Natural sciences more or less doesn't exist. You want to be making sure that you're making clear in this part why it is you want to do this subject that is particular to Cambridge rather than the similar version that you can get elsewhere. You know, for land economy, why not just economics? What is the appeal of the land bit? Why do you want to do natural sciences? Why do you want to have that extra bit of chemistry still in there when you've applied to biology everywhere else? And this is where you want to think about the kind of the dialogue you have between the main personal statement and the additional personal statement. So if we, you know, go back to our date analogy, if you're sending that message to a variety of different people who you'd like to spend some time with, you know, you want to be customizing that message to the person you're sending it to. You don't want to suggest to the one who hates going to the cinema that you go to the cinema. You want to make a tailored pitch, and that's what you're doing here. You want to make sure that it's clear why you want to do this course and not another course, because if you just repeat the arguments you were making in your main personal statement, saying that you love biology, they're going to go, why natural sciences then? Why not biology at Oxford, for example? You want to make that really clear and really specific. And this goes particularly, we mentioned land economy. I shouldn't imagine there's anyone on the call applying for Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic. It's a pretty niche course, but it only exists at Cambridge in the whole country to the best of my knowledge. And so that's a little bit of a special case. It's something I know a little bit about. I have a good friend who went to Cambridge to study it. So if you ever want to talk about that, then do let me know. But that's a niche case that we won't talk about here. But essentially, everything I've said there about being specific goes even more for that course because it is a one-off. Now, we mentioned a little bit earlier on some of the mistakes you might make. I find mistakes are often the easiest way to learn. So let's just focus on a couple. You probably don't want to go on and about the college you've chosen. Where you are interviewed is somewhat based on the college you've chosen in your application, but not entirely. We talked about this a few months ago in a college choice webinar. But essentially, some colleges are more popular than others. They tend to be the ones that are located closer to the center of town, that are older, that have more famous former pupils. Those tend to have a lot of applications. Other colleges will have not so many. And so the students will be the applications will be sort of shuffled around so that every college has a similar number of applications to look at and to make sure everyone has the same chance of getting in. So you can talk about your college, the college you picked, but chances are, well, there's a good chance that you won't be interviewed by them at all. And again, it's a good opportunity to avoid, like we mentioned earlier, you don't want to be sending a message to one person saying how much you fancy another person. You want to be keeping things neutral or customized. We're customizing for Cambridge, but on the college level, I think we can keep it fairly neutral. Another thing to remember is to think about how this all works in context. So if you're the admissions tutor, the way this works is you have, I'm sort of going to do some props, which tend not to work very well on a webinar. You've got a stack of personal statements, sort of like this, just piles and piles and piles of them. And what you're going to do is you're going to open up each personal statement one at a time, and you're going to read through them. You're going to read the personal statement. You're going to look at the A-level qualifications, the admissions test scores of the person. You're going to read the additional personal statement, and then you're going to move on to the next person. You're going to read them one at a time. So if you're recapping what you've written in your personal statement, the person who's reading through your application has just read that. Maybe as few as 10 seconds ago, they finished reading it. You don't want to just be recapping what you said in your personal statement because they've just finished reading it. Probably they can remember. If they can't remember, then I'm not totally sure that they're entirely suited to a life in demanding academia at this point. They should probably move on with their career. But they're going to have just read it. Don't recap what they've just read. It's not going to be very interesting. And it's kind of a waste of that opportunity you've got. You want to have something else to say that is Cambridge specific. Think of it as being kind of like a Zoom. You've got the main personal statement. They finish reading that, and then you zoom in and you tell them something specifically about their course, about Cambridge. That is a level of extra detail. So they've had the big picture from the personal statement, and now they get the little picture, the zoomed in bit that's really focused on Cambridge. And this is where, again, you want to stay focused on the course. The biggest mistake you can make here is just go off on a kind of rambling speech about how cool Cambridge is, or how you've always wanted to go there because it's prestigious, or because you really want to be in the footlights. None of those things are going to help your application. So don't put them in. I would much rather you did nothing than went off on a speech about how great Cambridge is. So we can look at some examples. We have got, how many examples have I got? I've got 3. We're a lovely round number. So that's how our first one. I suppose I'll read it aloud, because although it is written down, it means we'll also get it on the subtitles. So this person has written, I'm attracted to the Cambridge course for a variety of reasons. I'm particularly interested in linguistics and the impact of language on culture rather than solely literature. For example, as I researched the details of the Russian course at Cambridge, I was impressed by the possibility of studying grammar through a comprehensive training system, including register, syntax, and idioms. I also welcome the opportunity of having access to a non-standard Russian class where an authentic manner of Russian speech is taught. So let's see, what good things have we got here? First of all, we're focusing on why Cambridge. We haven't been distracted by generalities. We're sticking to the topic. I want to go to Cambridge, nice and clear at the top. And we've established that we're interested in it because they want to look at the linguistic side of things, not just literature. So we have made clear that there is something that they are not interested in and that they are focused in on the Cambridge offer. We then have this research into the details of the course, which I mentioned earlier. I don't know what the comprehensive training system is, and I would have wanted a little bit more detail here about it, because just giving a name is a little vague, but it is already its focus on the specific aspects of the course, and it's also a focus on the way that things are taught at Cambridge as opposed to other places, and saying how interesting that is to her. And that's really, really useful. You want to be talking not just about the course content, but about the course approach. And we also have, and this I think is the best part, pulling out a really fine-grained thing, saying there is this particular course that is an optional course. You have the opportunity, an optional course in non-standard Russian that she's particularly interested in because she wants to know how real Russian people in Russia or Belarus actually speak today. And there's this implicit contrast between the formal structure of Russian, the language, the grammar, the syntax, the way that people actually speak. So we're bringing together here the kind of formal aspects of the training and learning with a kind of more down-to-earth understanding of the language. So everything here is about why she wants to do the course. It's about the teaching, it's about the detail of the course. Like I say, this is a really pretty good one. I would say if you put out something like this, you're going to be absolutely fine. It's a little shorter than it could be. Perhaps it would have been nice to have a little bit more detail about the comprehensive training system. But again, if you run out of things to say, it's better to finish than it is to waffle. So let's have another look at another one. So this person writes, my fascination with the Cambridge history course came after attending the shadowing scheme in February. During the scheme, I attended a civil rights movement lecture focusing on the idea of Reconstruction and exploring the vulnerability of American history that resulted in some of the events that took place in the Jim Crow era. Prior to the lecture, I'd only studied civil rights in regards to the different attitudes people held at the time. However, this taught me the importance of looking at history from different perspectives and examining the many different factors that can influence this. This was the deeper insight that initially inspired me to study history. Now, this one is okay. It starts off well. This is the reason I wanted to study the Cambridge history course. It's because I came here through part of this shadowing scheme in February. Now, I'm a little bit harsh on this one. I'm not sure this makes logical sense, this first sentence, because if you were only fascinated once you arrived on the scheme, why did you come on the scheme? Logically, the interest predates going on the scheme, because presumably this is something you have to apply for. So I'm a little worried at the beginning that this doesn't really make logical sense. And this is a problem throughout this statement, unfortunately. The second sentence, the turning point here is the vulnerability of American history. I don't know what it means for history to be vulnerable. I think they might mean contingency, which is to say that that events aren't set in stone, that things can change on small probabilities, on small events. And so suggesting that Reconstruction needn't have been a failure, or that the establishment of the Jim Crow institutions wasn't inevitable. But that isn't what vulnerability means, and it makes it hard to follow what's going on in this sentence. We then continue into the next one. Prior to the lecture, I'd only studied civil rights in regards to the different attitudes people held at the time. Again, I'm not totally sure what this is supposed to mean. Civil rights is a political movement, so I suppose that you can say that some people were in favor of it, some people were against it. There were different attitudes around race and equality that were prevalent at the time of the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s and 70s. But I'm still not totally sure what you mean by people's attitudes. And And the idea that aged 18 going to this shadowing scheme, you have now come to the idea of looking at history from different perspectives. It speaks to me as being a little bit naive. I would like to think you would have come to this realization earlier. And this is the deeper in, we then go on to describe this as a deeper insight. I'm not sure it is a particularly deep insight, because the insight appears to be history needn't have been the way it was, things could have been different, and it's important to look at things from different perspectives. I'm not convinced either of these are deep insights. I would say they're quite shallow insights. And so while the start of this statement is good, we're starting off with a specific experience, we're talking about a particular level of interest, the intellectual development isn't here, the logic of it doesn't really follow, and we haven't learned anything outside of that first sentence about why Cambridge. What we've learned is they want to study history. I haven't been convinced that they're particularly skilled at studying history, because these aren't deep insights, and I don't know why they want to go to Cambridge. Essentially, it appears to be
a little bit waffly. So so
yes.
they're trying to fill it out with almost repeating themselves. I mean, as you said, it's not a particularly deep insight, and it's sort of lots of wording all over the place, really.
Yeah, it's the right idea, but this has such a first drafty kind of feel to it. I don't know about you, Rory. I find this is the kind of writing I tend to produce if I'm warming up. The way I write is I tend to write like a bad page first, and then I'll get into it, and then I just throw away that first page. And this feels a little bit like that to me. I haven't figured out what you're doing yet. And so I want to see the third or fourth draft of this. And this may well be from a student who didn't realize they had to fill this out. They hadn't thought about it, they hadn't prepared. And so what you've got is something that's a little bit vague. So what you want is to have something that is more specific, more grounded than this. But cool, let's have a look at another one. This one is, this is the worst one. Excellent. See, this one's really dreadful. Now, how do we start? Let's see. Cambridge has been ranked among the very best in physical natural sciences by many reputable world university ranking bodies. This speaks volumes about the education and research quality at Cambridge. Many Nobel Prizes in chemistry have been awarded to Cambridge affiliates since 1904, 24 in total, with 6 recipients since the turn of this century alone, the most recent one being in 2017. This reflects the depth and relevance of the Cambridge course and its impact to the world. I aspire to be an accomplished and outstanding research chemist, standing out among peers and making significant contributions to the world. Well, there are lots of things to dislike here. To start off with, a lot of this is just flattery. It is congratulating the reader on working at Cambridge. Cambridge is a really big deal. Many reputable world university ranking bodies. I would query that there are actually any reputable university ranking bodies. I think university ranking is kind of nonsense. To suggest that any of those bodies are reputable when compared with the universities themselves is a little silly. I don't think anyone is suggesting that the US News and World Report is doing Harvard a favor by telling them how clever they are. I don't think that's quite the way around these things work. We then learn about Nobel Prizes. I would never mention Nobel Prizes in your personal statement. Just don't do it. It's great. Lots of people at Cambridge have won the Nobel Prize in the past, which is lovely, but doesn't tell me about anything about you, the applicant. It seems to suggest that you would like to win the Nobel Prize. Wouldn't we all? I would like to win the Nobel Prize. Would you like to win the Nobel Prize, Rory?
Sure. I mean, if I wouldn't turn one down,
No. I mean, even one of the lesser Nobel Prizes, I would be happy with chemistry. I'd prefer peace, but I would be happy with the Nobel Prize for chemistry. I might even settle for physiology. But again, this doesn't tell me anything about you, and it's just flattery. The other thing to bear in mind is we mentioned here that 6 people have won it since the turn of the century, and some quite recently. It's entirely possible the person reading your personal statement has won the Nobel Prize, knows the person who's won the Nobel Prize, perhaps doesn't like the person who's won the Nobel Prize. Maybe they're an unpleasant colleague. You don't know who's reading it. The person who's won the Nobel Prize isn't going to be impressed. The person who didn't win the Nobel Prize might resent being reminded that they haven't won the Nobel Prize. The person who works with the Nobel Prize person who isn't very nice might have objections as well. It's a weird mix of flattery and risk, which I don't like at all. We then have another one of our logical inconsistencies. Apparently, all of the Nobel Prizes reflect the depth and relevance of the Cambridge course. Now, again, I do not have a Nobel Prize in chemistry or anything else. But my suspicion is that the bit you win the Nobel Prize for is not the bit that's in the undergraduate chemistry course. Hopefully it is, because that really improves my chances of winning the Nobel Prize. Because although I failed GCSE chemistry, I think if I really went for it, I could probably do up to degree level chemistry over the course of several years. And in that case, maybe I could win the Nobel Prize, because apparently those two things are linked, and I don't think that's true. I don't know how many of the people who won the Nobel Prize in chemistry did the Cambridge undergraduate chemistry course. It may well be none of them. They may well have done other things at other universities before moving to Cambridge. All in all, it doesn't tell us anything about the course. It tells us literally nothing about the course. It tells us that it is deep and relevant, but it doesn't, well, you know, if again I was going on my date this evening, if I were to tell you, Rory, that I am deep and relevant and leave it there, I'm not sure you'd be impressed.
No, not at all. No, so I'd like a little bit of more, explanation, perhaps an example of this depth or relevance. A story, an anecdote.
Yes, you'd want some evidence, because at the moment I can't tell that you've read anything about the course. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but you're claiming that you've learned a lot about it. And then we finish it. I aspire to be an accomplished and outstanding research chemist. This runs the risk, and I see this more in personal statements than in these short form ones. There is always a temptation to say how clever and smart you are in a way that suggests that you should be the teacher. And you don't want to do that. This story about the fact that all you've done is focused here on Nobel Prizes and how you want to be an outstanding chemist, it doesn't feel to me like you want to learn. It feels like to me you want to teach. It feels like you already know it all, that you want to come and pick up the prestige of Cambridge rather than doing the work. You've told me that the course is deep, but you haven't told me anything about it. I haven't learned anything about you that makes me think, you, the applicant here, that makes me think that you've really engaged with the course, that you have any particular ideas. There's just nothing here that supports your application. Now, maybe all of your test scores are fantastic. Maybe your standard personal statement is good. And, this is chemistry, this isn't English. If your writing is a little subpar, then you're more likely to be able to get away with that in chemistry than in English. But if your test scores don't back up the sort of slight hint of arrogance in this, then no one's going to be interested in meeting you. They're not going to want to come and interview you, because the overall impression here is that there's nothing here that makes me want to give you an interview or a place. There just isn't any personality behind it, and what personality there is, it doesn't seem like a good fit.
That's the thing. It sounds sort of, basically you're talking about, I want to stand out amongst my peers. I want to be accomplished, and it's all about them, not about the course necessarily. Absolutely.
It's someone telling me how good looking they are, which might well be true, but yeah. And there's no, to the best of my knowledge, there aren't any photos in the personal statements either, so even that wouldn't work. So that sort of brings us to the end of the slides. I'm now going to hand over to Rory, who's going to talk about the support that we offer as an organization beyond me saying mean things about other people's SAQs. Don't worry, we did get everyone's permission to share these, so don't feel that anyone's being travestied. Rory.
Right. Yes. So I'm not sure, those of you who are on the call, if you've had a look at the website or how much research you've done, but basically we offer various programs of support for Oxbridge and medical schools. So I don't know who's in control of the slides, but if you'd like to go on to the next slide. So there's really sort of four parts, or four pillars, as it were, of our support. The first being one-to-one tuition. So you would be matched with a tutor who's done the same course at the same uni as yourself. As far as that's possible, obviously we get some quite rogue courses, but most of the time, the amount of hours sort of ranges on how much support you need. But the key thing is they've been through the process themselves. They understand the difficulties and the challenges. So they've scored in the top 10% of their admissions test, if there is an admissions test. And so they can take you through your personal statement, they can take you through the admissions test and also the interview as well, because I don't know if those of you who are listening know that basically, if you imagine the whole application as a pie chart, around 40% of the weight of your application is on the admissions test. Another 40% is on the interview, and your personal statement and your grades are 10% each. So we sort of spend a lot of time, often work with students for sort of a year or sometimes 2 years working on all these parts. So one-to-one tuition is the first part of the program. And the second part would be online resources. So if we start to go to the next slide. So, I mean, as a company, we've written, I think it's over 120 books compared to the rest of the industry who have written 8. Most of them written by one of our founders, Dr. Rohan Agal. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but he's fantastic and sort of a fountain of knowledge about the application process and about Oxbridge in particular. And as you can see, we have past papers and mock papers for every admissions test. So we create our own mock papers based on past papers if there aren't that many. And it's really the hub of the program. There's a student portal where there's 24/7 support. You can submit essays for marking with the tutors. You can submit personal statement drafts, which again get sent off, and within 72 hours you get feedback, which is really the most important part, because you can do all the preparation you like. You can go through all the past papers, all the books, but it's getting that one-to-one feedback which you can get through the portal and obviously from your tutor. There's also video series on every admissions test and the interview process called the Academy. So you'd learn all the theory and the content. You practice them with timed papers and past papers, and then you can go into the real thing feeling confident that you've gone through. We also have loads of reading lists, to explore the subject, recommended reading lists. So it's a really good place to get all the information you need. You'd work through a structured sort of program guide and syllabus like you would at school, so you're not sort of left on your own wondering what to revise and when. Which moves us neatly onto the third part, which is our weekly enrichment seminars. So as you can see, they're weekly seminars or lectures. They're basically university level lectures designed to get you thinking and debating like a university student. So they're really interactive. So for each session each week, there's pre-reading, sort of handouts of, so what the lecture is going to be on, and they could be on the sort of different streams of lectures. There's sort of medical streams. Obviously, if you were doing medicine, you'd be put into that stream, law, and so on. And there's homework for each one as well. So it's quite easy to sort of sit there and just watch these things for an hour, but actually, it's really interactive and engaging. And as I said, practicing, discussing and debating these ideas with other students doing the same course. So a really good way to prepare for the interview with, academic discussions, which you might not have access to or practice, at school even. So that, students find these particularly useful. And then finally, we have our intensive courses or our day courses. Some are over 2 days, some are half a day, some are 1 day. Depends on your individual course and admissions test. But it's really to consolidate all the work you've done so far in the program. So you might have signed up 6 months ago, so they sort of come towards the end of the program, but we position them before each application hurdle. So the personal statement course is near the deadline for personal statement, which I think most of you, if you haven't done it yet, may have missed. And then the admissions test is near to the relevant admissions test, and so on. So it's, in small groups of, 4 to 8 students, to bring all the work you've done together and make sure you feel as confident as possible going into the real thing. And it's something, which we invested in, particularly the interview intensive course very heavily last year. based on the success, and we want to make sure that it's as efficient and successful as possible. So this is something that really gives you that extra boost of confidence, gives you that final springboard going into the real thing, so that you can go in and smash it.
Yeah, thanks, Rory. I would say the interview course is my favourite part of the year. It's so nice to meet all of the students we've been working with, and I think it's really the most valuable part of the support we offer. There's a lot you can do yourself in terms of preparation for the personal statement, for the admissions test. We provide great resources, but the opportunity to have a real intensive, difficult mock interview with someone you don't know who can really stretch you, that's something that is going to be really hard to find elsewhere, and is the bit that can make the biggest difference to application. I remember my own application to Oxford 14 years ago. God, that's a long time. And the biggest mistake I'd made is I hadn't practiced the interview sufficiently. I'd only done mock interviews with teachers at school who I knew and trusted and had a good relationship with. And then I got into the real interview, and it was too intimidating. It was too scary. I made stuff up. I panicked. It didn't work. And if I'd had real practice with people I didn't know, then I would have been better prepared for the sort of shock of what the interview was like. And that is something that we're really keen to provide, because it makes such a big difference, and it's so difficult to get hold of elsewhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's why we often people say I'll worry about interview prep after the BMAT or after my NSA or whatever it is, which is all well and good, but actually is often too late, because if you get offered an interview, you normally you only get a few days notice, which of course is too late to start preparing. So we work with students for 3-6 months or even a year just on the interview prep, as well as all the others, so that when it comes to it, they're not surprised, it's not a shock. They've practiced discussing and debating it, and it's not just sort of a nice casual chat about you and the subject. It can often be quite difficult and challenging, as you've said. So yeah, absolutely.
The other good thing to know is that all this seems to work. We have had over 400 offers since we started as an organisation. Our success rate is really enviable, and we do particularly well with students applying for medicine as well. It all compares quite flatteringly with some of the more expensive schools in the country. We don't have the snazzy outfits of Eton, but we do have very comparable success rates. So that's nice. I have spoken to Rohan about the outfits, and he will not relent. Still no fun outfits for us. But I mean, you've seen Rohan. He isn't a particularly he's not a very snappy dresser, is he?
Well, I think he's described as his sort of co-founder Harry as very functional and pragmatic in everything, including his approach to clothing. And I've got to say, I was in fact at Eton College as well, so I know about the silly clothes, but also how underprepared even some of the top schools can be. I mean, the Oxbridge preparation for us was also terrible. And again, we didn't have mock interviews or anything like that, so. Even sort of the top schools often find themselves lacking in resources and time, to give that one-to-one feedback that's so crucial.
Oh well, I wasn't aware of that. I should if I'd known, I would have made more of a point of it.
Yeah, the outfits were silly. They were silly. I can tell you that.
If you've enjoyed this webinar, hopefully you have. Please drop a review on Trustpilot. I have committed to putting the first nice review of the webinars into all the webinars. So please do that. It's also a great opportunity to read about the work we've done, understand how we've worked with students and parents, see a little bit of the feedback. You get the good and the bad on Trustpilot, which is why I recommend people look there, because it shows that we're not hiding anything. Rather than just cherry picking our own preferred reviews. And that sort of brings us to the close for this week. So what we will do is we will take questions for about 10 minutes, and then I will escape to watch Fulham versus Bournemouth. Hopefully
escape to watch the same match as well.
Hopefully Alex Mitrovic won't be on form. As a Bournemouth supporter, I suspect that you have the opposite view.
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, the stadium's 20 minutes away from my house, so I'll be making a brisk walk to go and see it.
Oh, wow. If I'd known, I'd have let you go earlier.
No, not at all. This is obviously much more important.
I would dispute that, but all right. So a classic first question: when will this webinar be posted online? So we pop these online every week. They normally go up on Wednesday or Thursday. It's just a case of how long it takes to reprocess the recording and get it up online. But that should be on the website Wednesday or Thursday, so you can watch it back. There are also absolutely loads of these archived. I'm not quite sure how many. It must be close to 100 now. So if you want to watch days and days and days of me presenting these webinars, the recordings exist. I do not recommend it. But if you would like to, there is loads of information there about interview preparation, about personal statements, a whole range of things that you can have a look at. Here, running in the background is rather loudly a oh, I need to turn that noise off. A recording, a little video showing you how to book a consultation with us. That gives you the chance to speak to Rory or one of his colleagues and get some real one-to-one targeted support from us. That's the best way to get hold of us. You've got the web address there, and it's entirely fee-free, commitment-free chat with Rory and his colleagues to see what we can do to help. So let's have a look through some questions. So Sally asks how the APS form works. So when you have sent off all of your UCAS stuff, which you should hopefully be doing this evening, you should be prompted to fill out the additional information through a portal called My Cambridge. You get emailed about a day or two after you've sent in your UCAS application, and you then have another week to deal with it. So you should hopefully, if you sent off your UCAS application, let's say today, with an hour before the deadline, you should get that supplementary application stuff sometime tomorrow or on Monday, and then you've got until Sunday evening to fill that out, and that's Saturday evening next week, sorry, and that's 6 p.m. But it shouldn't, as I say, all of the information about what's going to be in there is available on the Cambridge website, so I would recommend reading it, preparing it before you get the form, so it's nice and easy to fill out. But you get about a week between the arrival of you sending off the UCAS and the extra stuff. Let's have a look. Shreyash asks about talking about their parent attending Cambridge. I think it's a bit of a tricky one, Rory. Where do you stand on bringing up parents?
I mean, it's as you said, it's a tricky one. I mean, on the one hand, you know, I don't think that. I mean, I'm sure they hear that quite a lot. I mean, again, I know that when I was applying, you know, it's not quite as long ago, but still feels like a very long time ago. You know, and it would have been very different when the parents went there. I mean, for sure, you could probably mention they had such a great time, or I was inspired, you know, or they showed me it, or I was introduced to it from them. But I do think the main focus should be you and your own personal motivations. Something other than, oh, you know, my dad went there and loved it, so I'm going there. You know, I mean, my dad went to Oxford, and it put me off going to Oxford, if anything, or at least I didn't get in. So I would personally leave it out. But if you feel strongly that it will help your case, then perhaps go for it.
Yeah, again, it's a case of you want to be talking about yourself, the reasons to take you. You don't want to run the risk of saying that you should go because your dad did or that your mum did, because it's not a great reason. Let's face it. We have. Rochella asks, is it worth linking the SAQ to the themes of your personal statement, or is it a good idea to introduce a new point? I think linking it up to the themes of your personal statement is a good idea. Remember, you're going to be the person who's assessing this is going to be reading one and then the other. So having a kind of continuity is really nice. But if you have a different point you want to talk about, if it's particularly relevant to your reasons for applying for Cambridge, then I think it's absolutely fine to move on to something else. But again, you just want to be making sure that you're showing you're showing new ideas, you're showing good reasoning, that you're focusing on aspects of the course you're interested in, and you don't want to risk repeating yourself, because again, the person who's reading your personal statement and the SAQ, they're going to be reading them back to back. So if it's repetitive, it's going to feel really repetitive because they're going to literally just finish reading it. And there are a couple of questions about timelines. Generally speaking, I think the tests are this year, some of them are a little earlier than they have been in the past, but they're all at the beginning, they're more or less all at the beginning of November, right? That's one for you, Rory, sorry.
Sorry, I was just reading through. I wasn't actually paying attention to what you're saying. I do apologise.
No, quite all right. So we've got the admissions tests coming up.
Yeah.
It's generally only about a week or two's notice for interviews, right?
Yes, and there's sometimes even less. Sometimes it's a week or less than a week. So as I said, that's why we sort of try and prepare people as early as possible. And that being said, it's not too late to get some extra support for your interview or for an admissions test. Obviously, some of them are this week coming. I think the NSA is on Wednesday and maybe a couple of others. But for the TSA and ones that are in November, there's definitely still a couple of weeks worth to get a bit of extra support.
Yeah,
just Talia's asked about the role of the interview, personal statement, the grades, etc. I'll just repeat. So it's basically 40% for the interview, 40% for the admissions test, and 10% for grades and 10% for personal statements. So what we say is no one's ever written such a good personal statement that they got into uni. Equally, no one's written such a bad one that it stopped them from applying. So while of course it's important and needs to be written well, it's arguably more important to focus on prepping for your admissions test and then getting a bit of interview help as well.
And we've had a few questions about medicine. The Cambridge and Oxford medicine courses are a little different from most other universities. Most places now do what's called problem-based learning, where you will sort of work through the body step by step. You'll learn the theory of how the lungs work, and then you'll learn about problems with the lungs. Oxford and Cambridge don't do this. They do a more old-fashioned style of teaching, where you spend the first several years doing the biology and the chemistry and the physics stuff, and you don't go out and do the medicine bit of medicine until a little bit later. So for your SAQ for medicine, this is a really good opportunity to talk about why you are interested in going about things in this particularly academic way, rather than the approach taken by the universities. So in terms of medicine and the SAQ, I would say that's where I'd be tempted to focus, because that's a point of differentiation. And Shirley asked about BMAT results. Yes, so the BMAT results will be an important part of your of the decision whether to bring you in for interview or not. We have, it's a few weeks back again, a whole presentation about BMAT scoring, which I recommend having a look at. But there is a really strong relationship between BMAT score and chances of interview. And so there won't be any interview decision until after the BMAT results have come out, which is normally something like the 19th or 20th of, oh no, it's of course, because there was no November BMAT this year. I'm not totally sure when the BMAT results come out, but you won't know about your interview outcome until after the BMAT, essentially. There are. The results for the BMAT are coming out at the end of November, so the 25th, apparently. So yeah, you will probably find out your BMAT result and get your interview offer very close together. So again, don't wait until you've got the interview offer to start preparing. You may only get a week's notice, which is really not enough time. And I can see there have been a bunch of, we've got a whole range of questions about admissions tests and statistics and things. What I would suggest is we have a test data walkthrough that I did a couple of months ago. I was just having a look in the archive and going back through that because I've answered almost all of these questions that have come through there. And also I can't remember the answers, which is why I recorded them rather than remember them. And I think we may wrap it up there, actually. So we can let Rory go dash down to the cottage. just to say, I've seen a lot of quite personal questions, quite focused things based on your personal circumstances. This is a great chance to speak to us directly. It's much easier for us to provide focused advice if we know a little bit about you, about your circumstances, about what school you're applying from, what subject you're applying to, your A-level grades, your GCSE grades, the preparation you've done already, things like that. Really, the best thing to do is to book a consultation. You can do that through the website, uniadmissions.co.uk/booking. I believe we have space today, and that gives you a chance to speak to Rory, to some of his team, and for us to provide really personalised support. And that's all completely fee and commitment free at this stage. I would love to stay and answer all of these detailed questions, but as I say, we've got to let Rory go. And a lot of these are going to require me going and opening spreadsheets and looking at regressions and things like that, which take ages. And I also can't do while also doing a PowerPoint. My laptop is not sufficiently sophisticated. So I'm going to call it a day there. Thank you so much for joining me, Rory. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me, and I hope to have been a bit of a help.
Yeah, a great help indeed. And I will wish you absolutely no luck at all in the football. But perhaps in future weeks I'll be feeling more generous. Yes, I hope it goes dreadfully for you. Early red cards. Yeah. An injury to Alex Mitrovic, or not that it'll keep him out of the World Cup. He is a lovely player.
I imagine he'll get a hat trick within 10 minutes. That's my
and Tim Ream to do something embarrassing. And we'll see you all again next week. Thank you so much for coming, and have a lovely weekend, everyone.